Unlike the rest of the mountain bike world, suspension fork selection is pretty limited when it comes to fat bikes. Several months ago, I reached out to one of the smaller players, Wren Sports, to see if I could give their inverted fork a thorough shakedown. They sent their 110mm travel fork over, and I've since tested it on everything from buff single track to techie rock gardens. So, how did the Wren do in the real world? And can it hang with the Bluto and the Mastodon as a quality fat bike fork option? Let's get into it. I think the best way to describe this fork would be controversial. A small part of the reason for that is due to the inverted design, but more of it has to do with the wide range of experiences people have had with it. Take a quick look at the forums online, and you'll see some people saying the fork has a million issues and is worthless, while others claim years of use with a supple ride and zero problems. Some of this can even be traced to what batch the fork came in from the factory, which seems to be putting out an inconsistent product. And that's the major, and frankly, only issue I really have with this fork. It just seems like you never know what you're going to get. Wren has been pretty good about handling issues by providing replacement parts and forks, but also by going back to the design of the fork itself. For example, there were a lot of issues with the fork locking up in colder temperatures, which you can imagine is a really big problem for a fat bike, so they designed an all-weather damper and then later made it the standard for the fork. They also moved to keyed stanchions to prevent issues with twisting and rigidity, something that's supposed to be a major benefit to this design in the first place. But if you read and trust the forums online, some are still experiencing the same issues as before, and new issues are rearing their head. I haven't been immune to these issues either. When I quickly load and then unload the fork, I get a clunk from it topping out. Wren recommended checking the rebound knob to make sure it's correctly installed, and mine was fine. The only solution I've found so far is to slow the rebound down so that it isn't able to spring back so hard. I see that as more of a band-aid than anything though, as it means I'm compromising on the ride quality. I know this comes off as a pretty scathing first impression, but here's the thing. Despite the apparent lack of quality control and the issues in the past with this fork, I still really like it, and I don't plan to put my Bluto back on unless this thing has a major issue. And there's a few reasons why I say this that we should probably get into. First of all, the ride quality of this fork is far and away better than the Bluto. The Wren absorbs trail chatter and small bumps with ease, while the Bluto seems to only move on significant hits. The difference isn't just something that seasoned riders would notice either. I first noticed it on a casual ride with friends and wasn't even thinking about the fork performance at the time. I've tried to get the same ride feel from the Bluto, but always end up with that inconsistent and squishy feeling from a fork with too little air pressure. The Wren just feels more composed in every situation, from washboards to rock gardens to hard hits from a drop. Wren claims the inverted design reduces the mass of the moving part of the fork so that it will react quicker and easier to the trail. While I don't know how much of the ride quality is attributed to the inversion or the damper, it does react quickly and easily to the trail surface. The decreased fork offset, 45mm instead of the traditional 51, also contributes to the ride feel. It feels more composed, with quicker steering and a front end that's less prone to wandering on the trail. You can add all the tokens and adjust knobs and air pressure as much as you want, but the Bluto will never have the same ride feel as the Wren. In some ways, it kind of reminds me of a Mastodon that went on a little bit of a diet. Speaking of tuning, this is another thing I love about this fork. The twin air system is surprisingly simple to use and offers an incredible amount of tuning ability. Instead of using tokens, which have a fixed height for set changes in spring progression, Wren's system uses air via a shock pump. This makes for much more precise tuning capabilities, and I found that even a few PSI difference is noticeable when riding. I was a little intimidated at first because it seemed so different than traditional forks, but now I feel like it's actually more simple than those designs. Another benefit to the Wren over the Bluto is tire clearance. Like the Mastodon EXT, this fork clears a 27.5 by 4.5 inch tire with ease, and that's a major limitation of the Bluto. While the Bluto does clear a 29 plus tire, I've had issues in muddy conditions in the past. I knew the Wren wouldn't have any issues with this, but it was really put to the test on a recent ride when a thunderstorm rolled in. I actually ended up with mud rubbing on the seat tube while the front rolled freely. Had I been using my Bluto, I would have run into rubbing issues up front long before the rear. The last thing I like about this fork is the lockout. Many forks still have some noticeable movement when locked out. The Wren, on the other hand, feels rock solid locked out and makes pedaling feel super efficient even when standing and pedaling hard. I tend to ride with rigid forks in the winter, and while a lightweight rigid fork is great, I mostly care about the rigid part. A suspension fork with a true lockout makes this fork something I might actually enjoy using all year. So, should you consider the Wren a real contender in the fat bike suspension market? Yes and no. It's hard to knock the performance and tunability of the fork, especially when compared to the Bluto. The 36mm stanchions and reduced offset give it better steering characteristics, while the damper and inverted design responds to bumps small and large with ease. It's the inconsistency and potential reliability issues that have me hesitating to respond with a resounding yes. It's like going to a restaurant and having the best meal of your life, and then going back a second time to find they have a different chef some days who doesn't know how to cook. Will you go back to that restaurant again? Probably, but you'll be a little more cautious about who's in the kitchen next time. I want to give Wren some credit too. In my experience, and from a lot of reading online, it seems like they've been amazing with customer service and they're working in the right direction. The most widespread issues in the last few months seem to be this top-out clunk, which so far is more of an annoyance than a catastrophic problem. But they've taken feedback and gone back to the drawing board on other issues to make things work, and I'm glad they're willing to do that. It's just unfortunate that some people have had to be the guinea pigs and lose time and money in the process. For now though, I'm going to keep using the Wren, because despite the flaws and problems others have had in the past, I just really love how it rides on my bike. It rides so much better than the Bluto while coming in at a lot lower price point than the Mastodon. And if you want to see more in-depth specs on this fork and how it compares in those categories with those two forks, be sure to go watch my first look video on this fork. I go way more in depth on things like price, travel, weight, things like that. If you want to see more of my videos in general in the future, please be sure to subscribe so that my videos actually pop up in your feed. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.